I'm trained as a classic French cook. I went to the Cordon Bleu. So I always loved food. I always worked in restaurants. I know how to make food. I know how to make food that people like. I'm passionate about manufacturing and industrialization. I've worked at Ferrero. I've seen these giant factories. I love that. And I also love the technical aspects of, chemistry and engineering and so on. So it's just all connected. And I said, well, I'm going to build a food business. I'm going to make, and not only will I build the brand, but I also want to be the manufacturer. So this is how it started. And I just quit my job and just pursue this full time immediately, and just like that.
As a young company, relatively young company, you need tomorrow money today to produce and to market and to get sales. You have some really cool investors so far with Robert Downey Jr.'s Footprint Coalition. What converted them to invest in a young Israeli company and to invest early?
The product was different. People try the product. It's food. You can tell whatever story you want at the end of the day. And also I encourage the listeners here, please try the product. Don't trust what my story is. Just try the product and try it for yourself.
I'm alive, no matter what you say. Bless your heart, need it in the worst way. La 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 la.
Welcome to another episode of Israel Means Business. Are you hungry? Ready for a hearty entree? We're thinking about steak, but new steak, that is vegetarian steak. Sounds frightening? Yet it looks like steak, it tastes like steak, it grills like steak, so it must be new steak. Joining us today is Amos Golan, the mastermind behind this food tech revolution, the founder and CEO of Chunk Foods. Amos is a visionary innovator whose expertise uniquely bridges the worlds of organic chemistry, physical sensory design, and classical cuisine. Chunk Foods has captured the attention of the high-end chefs who are serving up this vegetarian steak in their white tablecloth restaurants. Amos, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Shauna.
Absolutely. So Chunk is growing plant-based fibers into structured steaks that char, sear, and bleed, just like traditional meat, all with clean label of just 8 simple ingredients. Chunk Foods has captured the attention of high-end chefs and major national distributors, including investors like Robert Downey Jr.'s Footprint Coalition. So typically, the plant-based meat market has been dominated by ground options, burgers, nuggets, and mysterious ingredient sausages. But you've created Chunk Foods to setting your sights on the ultimate culinary holy grail, thick, juicy, prime cuts like premium steakhouse quality beef. So let's first start with the ingredients. You have just 8. That's amazing. How do you get by with just 8 ingredients?
Yeah, that's a great question. And out of the 8, it's really just 4, main ingredients. The rest is salt and water and fortification. But essentially, the product is made of soy flour that is fermented with a proprietary technology that is really very similar to how people have made sausage and cheese and yogurt for years. And we use this time-tested technology, but with a new twist to turn the soy flour into these fibers that you mentioned, to then ferment the fibers and get something that looks like a steak. We add a little bit of color, so beetroot juice for color, a little bit of flavor, some fat for that nice mouth coating, and that's pretty much it. That's the product.
Why did you come up with the name Chunk? What were some of your other choices?
Well, as an Israeli, at the time I lived in the U.S. I've lived in the U.S. for almost 5 years. Moved to Boston to do my master's, and then moved to New York and worked with Ferrero. And as an Israeli, I wasn't aware of some of the potentially negative connotations of the name. What I was after was a single word, a real word, so not a made-up word. I didn't want to use any words like beyond, impossible, or anything that indicates climate-related or green solution type words. I wanted to have something that's catchy, single word, and most importantly, with a URL I can pay for and buy that wasn't taken. So this is how I came up with the idea. I came up with a few other names. I don't even remember all of them. Butcher Bite and Sizzle and Steak, and many other ideas. At some point, we even hired a naming expert to help us change the name because our investors didn't really like the name, but ultimately we decided to keep it, and I'm really glad we did. I think it's a catchy name. You know, with the negative and positive connotations, people remember us, and they differentiate us and know us apart from the rest of the gang. So
I think it's a great name. When you go into a steakhouse, you say you want a chunk of beef. It's part of the nomenclature. I love it. But
exactly.
it's very clever. Actually, it opens up the topic of smart marketing of a brand, to be very, very careful to think about the sound decks of the word, the visualization of the name of the brand, and the ability to bring it to market so that it's memorable. I think it's very clever.
I think the most important thing is really that a name evokes an emotion. That kind of makes it memorable, and that people, you know, even today, some people, you know, they confuse beyond and impossible, just because they have this like similar, somewhat similar, you know, connotations. Whereas no one confuses chunk with anything.
Hmm.
Everyone has some feeling towards the name, which in my opinion is good, you know. So that's why we chose it and kept it.
Well, since you brought up Beyond and Impossible, they are trying to maintain market share by introducing products other than ground round. They have the Beyond Steak and Impossible Steak Bites. So how are you competitive to those brands and other steak-like non-meat products?
It's clearly, you know, one of the things we're thinking about all the time, because the space has been quite, you know, dense with companies that were working on products with similar names. Right now, there's less and less of them, which is I guess good for Chunk. But at the end of the day, how do you differentiate a great a prime cut of beef from, you know, a different cut of beef with the same you know, same part of the animal? There's a quality difference, right? So and one cut can be used for one application, and another cut can be used for other applications. I think where Chunk really wins is on one, the cleanliness of the label. So people want to eat clean, or as clean as they can, and our products are among the cleanest, if not the cleanest, in the category. The second thing is protein. Protein is huge these days, as you know, especially in the US, but all over the world. And Chunk products have some of the highest, if not the highest, protein content of any plant-based product. The reason is because we use this fermentation technology and we don't use any binders. So there's nothing there that kind of sticks everything together. It's the fermentation itself. So very rich in fiber, in protein, very very clean, very convenient. So the product can be cooked you know, you can use a microwave to cook it, you can use an air fryer, or you can put it on the grill. It'll work just as well. So this holy triangle, I think, of the, you know, foods in the US in 2026 of convenience, clean label, and protein is really where Chunk excels compared to others. And then the reality is that Chunk is used in locations where plant-based has never been used before. We are now serving the product. The product is being served at about 50 steakhouses, about 2,000 restaurants, including, you know, the cafeteria at Entropic and SpaceX and Meta, all the way to the guests, or at least in the past, the guest suite at the White House. You could get Chunk, all through like some Google campuses, some steakhouse restaurants, some even Pastrami Queen in New York had one location, the Moynihan Station location, that had a vegan pastrami sandwich with Chunk product. So it's just that the chefs, you know, they have their opinion about quality, about what they want to serve, and they choose Chunk over other products. So this is really what differentiates us.
When you made the pastrami sandwich, is that a product that a consumer can buy in the freezer section, or do they have to go to Pastrami Queen to get that? And did the chef there reconstitute Chunk to create the pastrami texture and feel and flavor?
So we have four core products, different types of steaks. We have a pulled product, and the fourth product, the fourth form factor, is what we intentionally call slab, which is essentially somewhat similar to a brisket. But we decided not to give it an actual, name of a cut of beef, but we wanted to give it something a little more abstract. We sell, so this slab product can be bought at different retail stores, including in the Northeast. I think Market 32 has them. There are a couple of retailers that carry this product. I believe also AGB has it. And what Pastrami did was they use a version of that same product that is, you know, meant for restaurants, and a little bigger and weighs a little more. It's 1.5 pounds in weight. and they treat it exactly the same way they treat their brisket. So they season it with the same seasoning, and they smoke it, and they do exactly the same thing they do with their regular brisket. It only takes less time to actually cook it. But other than that, and then they slice it on the same, I think they separate meat slicers because some vegans prefer it that way, obviously. But other than that, it's exactly the same. Same sandwich, same mustard, same everything.
That sounds delicious. Now, I'm a vegetarian, so that's why I love non-meat based products that I can sink my teeth into. And I've eaten also at the Butcher's Daughter, and I've where they prominently say Chunk Foods, which is another great marketing technique that you've wrangled to get them to put the name Chunk on their printed menu. Brilliant, actually.
Thank you. And we at the beginning when we just started, we were obviously insisting on it and asking folks to do it. And sometimes, and Butcher's Daughter they were great, and we've been working with them from the very beginning. But today, a lot of restaurateurs just choose to add the name of the product and sometimes even the logo to the menu, even without us asking or definitely not paying for it. And they're happy to do it because they know that when folks who are looking for plant-based options see Chunk, they see quality, they know what they're getting, and they want what they're getting. So,
well, it's the genius of a brand within a brand, sort of the reflecting glory that customers are walking in there because they want the Chunk product. So a restaurant gets the benefit of more foot traffic, and the company brand, such as Chunk, gets the benefit of all these eyeballs that are going to that restaurant. So it's very clever. So we've spoken a little bit about how you make it. Let's dive a little bit more into the technology for a second. Is this a fermented product? Do you manipulate the end product even further to get this very heavy texture? Tell us a little bit about your secret sauce to the extent you can.
Absolutely. So in very broad strokes, the way this works is that we take soy flour, and we have a process to turn that soy flour into something that looks like, let's say, strands. And those strands are then fermented together to form something that looks like, for lack of a better word, a roast beef. And that roast beef is then, at the end of this fermentation process, now is is basically Chunk, but still doesn't have some of the color and flavor. And so what we do is we cut that into different shapes and sizes. We add some color and flavor and fat, and we package. That's pretty much it. So it's very, very, very similar to how you would, make any other fermented product. But what we really are able to create is this directionality of the fibers and the juiciness that it's kind of the signature of the product. And then by cutting it in different shapes, we can get a very thick steak or a thinner steak or cubed product that we are now launched at Sprouts and Whole Foods. So the different form factors are what we're able to get with this post-processing of those roast beefs, so to speak.
So are you saying that it's pretty simple to make plant-based meat?
Well, it's simple when you know, right? I think it's today it's simple. When I started and out of my kitchen almost 6 years now, 5.5 years ago, I could barely ferment a single steak every day. But today we make, tens of thousands a day. So it's when it's simple, but it requires some unique machinery, requires obviously a lot of R&D. We have amazing food scientists and amazing biologists who work with us to tame the organisms that we use for the fermentation and really understand how to make this work. But once it's like baking bread, it's like making cheese, it's something that can be done at scale.
But nonetheless, even though it's a category, there are certain people who become masters at it, and the consumer looks for it on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
So Amos, you have a very interesting and complex background. How did you educate yourself to be a creator of clean, natural, plant-based meat? What drew you to this category, and what in your background have you been using to propel yourself forward?
So, you never know why you're doing something until kind of you look back and you see how things tie up, right, and the dots connect. But when I moved to the US, I think I was quite fortunate to move to the US in 2016, when the category was really just starting to grow very rapidly. So I moved to the US. For the first time in my life, I go to a Whole Foods, and I think it was a month after Beyond launched there. So I started seeing the Beyond, the ground beef brick, and tried it and liked it, and I thought it was really innovative. And then heard about Impossible and their collaboration with Momofuku, and so things were heating up in this category. It was a cool category. It grew. Some of these, especially Impossible, they've invested a lot in expanding through university. So I went to MIT in Boston, so I in Cambridge, so I got to see it, see people consuming it and talking about it, and then I fast forward a couple of years, I just before COVID, I worked for a food company, for Ferrero. And I worked on a project that has nothing to do with alternative meats, with meat alternatives. But long story short, we were working on removing sugar from some recipes and using other commodities to replace sugar. Now, using something like soy or wheat or pea obviously creates the problem of you don't want your Nutella or your chocolate to taste like soy or pea or wheat, right? So we had to kind of transform these things and give them a new life, a new texture, a new flavor. And one of the things I learned through that process was the process of fermentation, and specifically the process of solid state fermentation. So taking a solid input like soy in our process, turn that into a flour, and then giving it a new life. Now, it never really worked for us with confectionery, but I noticed that it imparts this really nice umami flavor. And then I said, well, there's this booming space. It was just before COVID. So during COVID, obviously plant-based exploded even further, and there was the Beyond IPO, which was one of the largest at the time. And I had this idea for a technology which was not utilized. And kind of on top of all of this, I said, well, everyone's focused on ground beef, and ground beef was at the time, I think, like $4, $5 a pound. And what about a steak, which is $10 a pound or $16 a pound, or like all these other cuts that are more valuable and also harder to create. So this was the idea. I said, well, I think I have a technology to do it. I think it's going to be very clean. It's going to be tasty. I know I can make it work. And then in terms of my background, I just said, well, I'm trained as a classic French cook. I went to the Cordon Bleu. So I always loved food. I always I worked in restaurants. I know how to make food. I know how to make food that people like. I'm passionate about manufacturing and industrialization. I've worked at Ferrero. I've seen these giant factories. I love that. And I also love the technical aspects of, chemistry and engineering and so on. So it's just all connected. And I said, well, I'm going to build a food business. I'm going to and not only will I build the brand, but I also want to be the manufacturer. So this is how it started. And I just quit my job and just pursued this full time immediately, and just like that.
That's an incredible story of blending your great DNA to create a new DNA in a way, and all your interests combining together like flavors to create a food product. I think it's pretty amazing. When you designed or came up with the discovery that umami is the flavor that's coming out of this fermentation process, then you created the chunk steak, and you offer it at the retail level in teriyaki flavor or Texas barbecue. What are you doing to modify the flavor? Is it standard sauces, or do you also have some special secret sauce to create that as well?
So I think that our sauce line is an extension of our natural flavor line, and the idea is really that stems from both a marketing, branding, point of view, but also from a manufacturing point of view. We can, as a brand, we believe in clean label. I believe in making products that I'm happy to let my 3-year-old eat at home as much as he wants. Okay, so everything we use is super clean. We use even the sauces, they're all, our Texas barbecue, for example, we don't use liquid smoke. What we use for that smoky flavor is oak smoked salt. So we try to use only really, high quality vegetable, fruit, high quality ingredients, no stabilizers and so on, also in our sauces. But other than that, they're chef quality, restaurant quality sauces. Now, from the manufacturing side, the way I look at this is our products sometimes, for some people, it'll help them to get a simpler introduction to the brand. And if you flavor something with a flavor that people recognize, right, it's easier to start consuming them. It's more convenient. And then there's also the financial aspect. The sauces are, well, our sauces are very high quality. That's a different problem because they are also expensive. But in general, you're able to expand your capacity, right? So if I can make, 100 pounds, I'm just making this up, but let's say 100 tons a year, with the sauce, I can now make 150 tons without having to invest more in capex and so on. So the addition of sauces, I think, serves us on a brand level, on a retail offering. We can create more differentiation among retailers and what we offer them, but also on the manufacturing level and just like getting the cost of goods where they need to be and to get to the price point where we are, which is it's not cheap, but it's more or less at price parity to beef in most supermarkets. So this is what this enables.
Well, we'll come back to pricing, but on the flavors, are you thinking of creating bottled sauces as well as packaged meat?
We are. We have a partnership with a co-manufacturer in Israel that makes the sauces for us based on recipe that we've developed together. And some of the sauces have seen a lot of success in the US, but it's a completely different in terms of the go-to market. In retail, at least, the buyers are different because it's going to be either chilled or ambient, where we usually talk to the frozen aisle buyers. So it's potentially, yes, you're kind of like, reading my mind here because it's literally on my to-do list to talk to our co-man about this and see whether we're going to get this done for Q3 or at least Q4. But our core competence is the meat itself. And this is really where we focus most of our resources and what we really want to get, to the market as much as we can.
So have you thought of a shawarma flavor as well to get
Yes.
some Mideastern marketing going on, or
We have a
Israeli?
version. We have a version that we've developed. It's now in trials with a large multi-location chain in Israel. And that specific recipe was developed for a chain of a couple hundred locations in Canada, which I hope at some point we'll be able to get as a client. But yes, absolutely. And it's actually one of the better products. Still not in the market, but it will be definitely next year.
Yeah, I think that'll be brilliant. That's a real differentiator, without a doubt. So you
Absolutely.
mentioned pricing and the price points. Competitively, I'm sure you're charting this. The price of a chunk of steak compared to the price of chunk foods for the same number of ounces, as well as comparing that to the competition. Where do you place yourself in the pricing categories?
Yeah, it's really a great question, Sharona, and it's one of the challenges of the category, right? Because like on the one hand, meat is a commodity. It used to be very cheap in the US. I think the prices are going up all the time, and at some point it's going to be a premium price product also in the US. I guess it's already getting there. But so on the one hand, there's the pressure to meet the prices of meat. There really isn't any whole cut at the moment in the market, in the plant-based market. As you mentioned, Beyond is now starting they're launching a product. There was a company called Meaty, but they kind of ran out of business.
Right.
So there's not a huge amount of products to compare one-to-one, like apples to apples with and match their price. But when Meaty were around, they were more or less the same price. And then on top of all of that, there's the kind of common knowledge that for a premium brand that's an emerging brand, the early adopters are actually not that price sensitive, right? So like I'm not really catering for the tens or hundreds of thousands of retailers in the US, also in all the suburban areas that are very, very could potentially be where the shoppers could be as price sensitive, because I'm not at those scales. I'm still a very young brand where our early adopters are okay with another half a dollar here or there per pound. That's not what's going to make or break their decision to buy, and definitely not the decision to become a regular customer. Mm-hmm. If they like it enough, they'll probably buy it. So we made a decision to launch at our SRP is $9.99 for an 8-ounce product. So basically $20 a pound at retail, and so far it's working. To be honest, velocity, so the sell-through rate compared to the category is almost, depends where, but it's 3 times more than the category average, and it's really flying through, off the shelves. We're struggling to supply because there were some interruptions because of the of the kind of geopolitics here, so it's going well with this price point, and we feel like that compared to beef, it really depends what cut of beef you would compare it to. If you compare it to cheaper cuts, it could be a little more expensive, obviously, if you compare it. So beef would be in the range of, let's say, $10 to $20 a pound, maybe 30 if you buy in a premium store for a very premium cut. So we're at 20, and I hope that we will be able to not only compete with steaks, but ultimately also with different kinds of roasts and kind of stewing meats that are cheaper, and then just ultimately cheaper than any cut of beef. And we can definitely get there.
Well, you make a very strong point that positioning is critical in this. And positioning is the input of pricing, brand resonance, as well as, in this case, your ingredient deck, which is a compelling reason to purchase a chunk, 8 ingredients, most of which are condiments. Water
Yes.
and salt. It's almost a no-brainer, and the indifference to a price might be overcome very easily because the desire to have that quality of a product, almost like a wine. How do you choose a $2 chuck compared to a $20 bottle of wine in the same store?
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
and to be honest, we're seeing when product was more scarce and it was sold in less retail. Today, I think by the end of this year, we're going to be in about 3,000 doors in the U.S. But when it was sold only online through some online retailers, it would retail for 15, 16, $17 for an 8-ounce portion. So those earliest of adopters, they were just interested in trying the product and in buying it, and
Right.
adding it to their diet. And I think today we met a price point where, obviously not everyone can afford. It's definitely not on a daily consumption, but I think it's a comfortable, especially in bigger cities in the U.S. It's a comfortable enough price point that definitely is justified by the quality of the product and packaging and brand and so on.
Yeah, the packaging is very impressive. Now that factors into stores. You're in 3,000 doors, including Whole Foods, Sprouts. I bought some in Bristol Farms. So you're in high caliber stores that are known for better for you foods.
Yeah.
How did you get the buyers to want to put you into their shelves and into the freezer section?
And that is definitely a challenge today with the category and with frozen buyers in general, because frozen actually there's a renaissance in frozen foods in the US. There's a lot of innovation happening, and shelf space is scarce, but we've been in. So I think one proof point is just that before we started selling in retail, we already sold into thousands of restaurants and hotels and hospitals and retirement communities. So just one selling point is just chefs are choosing this, their customers are choosing it, it's on their menus. So starting from food service really is a very strong selling point. Second
Okay.
is that the format, people are seeing the format. It's a unique format. The steaks, the pulled meat, that slab is a very unique product, the one that looks like a brisket. And they want to entertain their customers, right? Their consumers. They want to make sure that they have the most innovative products. And last but not least, retailers are in the business of making money, right? And they what they understand is margin and penny profit. So the higher the velocity of a product, so the more units they sell, and the higher the margin they can make on it, the better, right? For the real estate that they have, the square footage they have. And chunk happens to be a little more expensive than the average in the category because it's a big package and it's a higher value product. It's a whole cut as opposed to a nugget or a burger. And it also has a much higher velocity. So velocity times the penny profit per unit, it's a no-brainer for a retailer. And these things feed into each other. You start with a small retailer, let's say in the West Coast, Bristol Farms, and before that we started with independents. They see the numbers, they see the numbers, they try the product, they see the validation from restaurants, and then it's quite an easy sale afterwards.
Well, did you use that story in getting funding? Now, as a young company, relatively young company, you need tomorrow money today to produce and to
Yeah.
market and to get sales. So you have some really cool investors so far with Robert Downey Jr.'s Footprint Coalition. What converted them to invest in a young Israeli company and to invest
Mhm.
early?
So I think, one of the one of the things that we've done, I think, also on a tactical level, was that. So we have our mother company is actually American. I founded the company when I lived in the U.S., and we were kind of set up as a Delaware company with an Israeli subsidiary, and we manufacture in Israel, and obviously we're very proud of it and so on. But I think a few things helped. So one was that the product was different. People try the product. It's food. You can tell whatever story you want at the end of the day. And also, I encourage the listeners here. Please try the product. Don't trust what my story is. Just try the product and try it for yourself. So I think getting these investors across the line was the first thing that we had to do was to make a really good product and get them to taste it. And we ship product all over the world to get these investors on board. The second is really just it definitely helped to have one foot in the US and kind of one foot in Israel. Both countries have amazing tech ecosystems, amazing investor ecosystems, and I was lucky to kind of have some connections in both, and to one conversation led to another. Met investors both here and there across the different sides of the ocean, and get folks interested. There was a time when plant-based was really booming, so timing was good. Then climate tech was really what a lot of folks were after, and food is basically the number one contributor to greenhouse gas and water usage and land usage and so on. So it was a clear for any climate tech, food tech, or even a generalist investor or even a family office like Robert Downey Jr.'s family office who cares about the future of people on this planet. It makes total sense to invest in food. So I guess that's how we managed to get some of them to join our journey.
Well, luck is about circumstance and showing up at the right time. So you live under an umbrella of luck. Amos, this has been very interesting. We've covered investment, pricing, product, marketing, a real business case study of a great plant-based meat company, and you've created something spectacular. But I have to go because it's almost time to eat, and now I want a vegetarian steak for my next meal with the steak and potatoes and some fried onions. I had your chunky steak the other day, and now I want more. So I'm off to the store. I want to increase your market statistics, and I want to satisfy my craving. As the song goes, food, glorious food. Yes, sir, I want some more.
Food, glorious food. What would you give for that makes perfect law? That's all that we live for.
Amos, you're really an amazing man, and you've created a great company. Thank you so much for joining us.
It was my pleasure.
Lovely. I'm Sharona Justman of the Israel Conference, and Israel means business. To see more conversations with extraordinary Israeli business entrepreneurs, visit theisraelconference.org.
For when I stumble, you hold them up, I watch them crumble.